Dear attendees, thank you for joining us from all over the globe. My name is Orit Adato. I'm a retired Lieutenant General and the first woman at the rank of 3-star General in Israel. As defined in our webinar today, I broke the glass ceiling in Israel about 20 years ago. The webinar theme is Breaking the Military Mold, Women on Front Lines, conducted by the American-Israel Friendship League, which has reinvented itself in the last few months, and under the COVID is doing about already more than 50 webinars with a lot of attendees all over the world, and with the JWI, the Jewish Women International. Well, I had the privilege to serve my country for 25 years in the Israeli Defense Forces, up to the rank of general, as the head of the Women's Corps, mainly in training and command positions, and engaging women in many military positions and professions at all ranks. I also had the privilege 20 years ago to become the first woman heading a security organization in Israel, the Israeli Prison Service, which is considered as a security organization in Israel for managing thousands of terror inmates in its facilities, alongside with the correctional system of penal inmates. For 9 years, I've been vice president of the International Correction and Prison Association, former president of International Women Forum Israel, founder and former board member of Forum Dvorah, Women in Security and Foreign Affairs, as well as a board member of American-Israel Friendship League and a chair of Gesher. We will discuss today the need for best utilizing our military human resources, especially in commanding and leadership positions. In particular, we will claim that diversity is an advantage to achieve these goals, and women in particular, considering similarities and differences between US Armed Forces and Israel Defense Forces regarding women military service. Our panelists represent diversity of profession and even generation here. We know that the US military is a professional one, while in Israel, it is a mandatory service for men as well as for women at the age of 18. This time, we are talking about military career officer, which minimize the difference between the two armed forces. Military service and reaching high rank is an important component in the Israeli society, playing a crucial role in social mobilization and integration in high public, political, economical positions. We will hear from our panelists how it works in the American society as well as in the Israeli one. In the US Armed Forces, all professions are open for women to volunteer, including all combat positions, while in the IDF, there is still some combat units and positions that are not open for women. And I'm mentioning yet not open for women. We will hear about the progress that has been achieved during the last 2 decades in the IDF and the progress in the US Armed Forces as well, the challenges that women leaders are facing along their career, and what they can do for making it friendlier to those on their way up. I am delighted to introduce our moderator for this panel, Ms. Meredith Jacobs, the CEO of Jewish Women International. Ms. Jacobs is an award-winning journalist and former editor-in-chief of Washington Jewish Week. She is the author of Modern Jewish Mom's Guide to Shabbat and co-author with her daughter, Sophie, on Just Between Us. Jacobs has served for 6 years as JWI Chief Operating Officer, managing communication, branding, messaging, and development. She led a lot of leadership development and initiative working closely with the philanthropic partner. She has served as a faculty member for the past 5 ZBT leadership conferences. Meredith, the floor is yours.
Orit, thank you. And I'm honored that you'll be staying to join us as a panelist today. So thank you so much for lending your voice to this conversation. Today's webinar, in a way, is a continuation of our Icons webinar from last month, where we spoke with women who served in both the U.S. military and Israel's IDF. Our conversation turned to women serving specifically in combat positions, and that conversation was so dynamic, we decided to follow it up with this one. For those of you who are new to my organization, Jewish Women International is a 123-year-old organization with a mission to build a world where all women may thrive. We work every day to end violence against women and girls, build access to long-term economic security, and connect highly accomplished women as mentors and role models to the next generation of women leaders. I invite you to learn more about our work at jwi.org. Now I'd like to briefly introduce our inspiring panel. Major Dr. Yael Arbel is the Deputy Commander of the IDF's COVID-19 laboratory. Under her leadership, the forensic DNA laboratory transformed into a COVID-19 laboratory within a week. More than 60,000 samples from soldiers of all ranks have been examined so far. Major Arbel is also commander of the Central District's Regional Dental Clinic and commander of 10 dental unit clinics. She's been awarded both the Surgeon General's Award for Excellence and the Chief of Staff's Award for Excellence. Cadet Olivia Kratala is a first degree at the United States Air Force Academy, which means she's a senior. She is a military and strategic studies major with a Russian minor. She's currently cadet commander for Squadron 11. Cadet Kratala, thank you for being here to represent the future of the U.S. military. Dr. Kylan Hunter is a Marine Corps combat veteran with multiple combat deployments as an AH-1W Super Cobra attack pilot, which, if you know what that means, that is a hard attack helicopter to fly. She finished her active duty time in the Marine Corps as the Marine Corps Legislative Liaison Office in the House of Representatives. She is an assistant professor of military and strategic studies at the U.S. Air Force Academy and co-director of the Athena Leadership Project. Dr. Hunter's research focuses on the intersection of social integration and military effectiveness with a particular focus on gender and unconventional warfare. I really could go on and on. Dr. Hunter's work has been published in numerous journals and publications such as the Washington Post, the New York Times, and she is co-editor with Kate Thomas Hendricks of Invisible Veterans: What Happens When Women Become Civilians Again. And finally, but only because of alphabetical order, retired Colonel Talia Lankry has spent her career in the IDF and is currently the head of the Home Front Division of the National Security Council, leading the national effort in the fight against coronavirus and mobilizing national processes in the context of home front emergency preparedness. Colonel Lankry has a variety of core professional command positions in the Armored Corps, the Ground Forces, and the General Staff, including battalion commander at the IDF's Officer School, head of the Operations Division of the Defense Department, and commander of the IDF Comptroller Unit. So let's get started. I want to ask all of you, and I know this is going to be a little different from the women serving in the US than those who are in the IDF, but what was the reaction of family and friends for the women in the US when you told them you were joining the military? And I guess for those in Israel, when you shared that you were going to actually build a career in the IDF and extend your service beyond what was required. You know what, Olivia, since you're the newest to this, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. Really, my parents were pretty excited about it. I was always encouraged growing up to do the things that I loved and pursue the career that I was like most passionate about. My dad was really excited. He was an infantryman turned combat medic, so he was glad that I was going into the Air Force, to say the least. But he was really pumped for me. My mom was really excited for me. So I got a very positive reaction from friends and family overall.
Was there something particular when you were growing up? I mean, I'm guessing you heard stories from your dad, but was there anything else that drew you to this particular calling?
I'm not really sure. I was gonna go to art school in Canada, like the beginning of my junior year of high school. So that had been my plan. And I just I started to look into flying more and leadership in general, and it really just, the academy drew me to it. I ended up coming here for summer seminar, and I said I'm either going to the Air Force Academy or I'm enlisting. So
amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you for your service. I love that. Art school or the Air Force Academy. You know, I'm sure that's common. What's way back and forth. Kylan, how about you?
Of course. And first I want to say just what a breath of fresh air it is to see like art school, academy. And when we talk about diversity, and I know we're going to talk a lot about what gender diversity brings, but when we think about how unique problem solving happens, why we really want to promote diversity, this is exactly the type of thing we need to be talking about too. You know, that to be a great fighter pilot or infantry officer, whatever it is, you don't have to be a, you know, hard STEM person or just a, you know, strategy, you know, think of traditional strategist. You know, fine arts has a lot to do with how we're going to solve problems, but I digress on that one. For me personally, it was interesting. I did not grow up in a military family. Other than grandparents who served because they had to at the time, you know, when there still was conscription in the US, there hadn't been military service in my family. So it's not something that was ever really discussed growing up, just not something that was talked about. When I joined the Marine Corps, my parents were surprised, I think is the mild term for it. There was a bit of disbelief in some senses of like, wait, we're just very confused as to what's going on. But I brought them out to when I was commissioned. So I went to officer candidate school. Like there's a whole bunch of different commissioning paths in the US to become an officer. So I went to officer candidate school. They came out to my commissioning. And I think that really changed their perspective on what the military was when they met the majors and colonels who at the time were my commanders, you know, who were their age, who were my parents' age, but were really able to build bridges across military and non-military service. So that really changed what they saw. They became very excited about it. It went from confusion to all in 100% Marine Corps of like, you know, I think my parents played the Marine Corps hymn more than I did. And
Wow.
yeah, so it's one of those things that what I think is really encouraging is from this sort of lack of understanding, you know, our family really became a model for bridging that civil military divide that we see so often here. So that's yeah.
Your story resonates so much with me. My son is Olivia's age, and he'll commission this May as a naval officer. And again, not a military family, not a path he had thought about. He took a class freshman year of college with the Naval Battalion at a school and kind of found his calling. And you're right. The first was like, wait, what? And the more we learned, the more we saw not only the incredibly impressive people who are in the military, what it means to serve, to be an officer, to lead, but also the paths it opens up. So yeah, I feel like I'm your parents also, just all in. Yeah, Elle, how about you? You know, what's it like in Israel? What was the reaction when, you know, after you completed your required service, you were like, nope, this is my career?
It's kind of funny because in Israel, everybody is a military family. You understand? It's like my brother is in the military now. My father was a lieutenant colonel. My husband is in the military, and you might as well ask me, are people surprised when you say you're a dentist? Because I get more reactions about that. It's almost like the way to go. When you do that, you're just continuing a route which is kind of embedded in your education. So we had no no surprising comments or something to be said about that. It was just natural.
Interesting. Talia, do you feel like there's a glass ceiling at the IDF? Or you talked about areas that aren't yet open to women. But even for those areas that are open, what's the experience like for women in the IDF?
Yes. First of all, I want to answer you just for a minute the last question, because I want to say that in Israel, it's you don't like you decided to be in career in the army, but from the position, and when you wake up 10 years after you go to the army and you say, oh, so this is my career. From the position, the family, my friends said, why do you need it? It's very dangerous because I participate in a few operations in the Israel army. So you don't decide that you want a career, but from the position. And about the class selling, yes, of course. Unfortunately, I felt it. Not in every position. I want to say that I had I was lucky because I were in the armor corps, and there is no women in the armor corps. And now also, I was the only woman that be in the armor corps and not in the other side of the operation. So I have a daddy, the armor, and they give me the position that never men were in it. But when I came to a colonel, I remember that my commander called me and said, I'm sorry, you can't do this position because we need a man for it. And I asked why I need to be a man for it, and they didn't know how to explain it. And eventually I did the colonel, a position as a colonel. But after it, there's nothing that I can do in the army in this line of operations. Maybe to do something else in the office, but not in the operation. So I really felt it.
Interesting. Orit, I saw that you unmuted yourself. Was there something you wanted to add?
I think I belong to the dinosaur generation, because at my time, becoming a career officer in the military for a woman was like in a Jewish traditional family. There you have the second career, the first career of the husband. So you should be, more with the children, more raising them, educating them, etc. And it was really a challenge to manage and to balance between your demands of the career on one side and demands of society on the other side, that you should stay and do everything like a traditional mother at home. But I can tell you, when you are certain and when your confidence is that that's what I want to do, you do it. And I raised 3 children, of course, during that time. So I am the old-fashioned one. I think we can see here, the differences between the generation, which is fascinating.
Meredith, I would like to add something.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm serving the Army right now, and what I feel is that there might be a glass ceiling, but I think it's thinner, and I think it has changed. I mean, if once it was because the system thought that a woman is not capable of men's performance, today it is more about adjusting the environment so it will fit us women better. So I feel that the vocabulary and the want to understand us is expanding. So it's encouraging for me. And I also think that the IDF in many ways is better in this than the society, because breaking the glass ceiling is not enough. There's still a need for a conceptual change in the traditional duties of men and women. When my kid is falling from the slide in the kindergarten, they call me. So, that's what I think anyway.
Yeah, Kyla and Olivia, are you seeing the same with the U.S.?
Yeah, I was just wanted to add on to that, and I think there's a few things, especially what Yael was just talking about, of actually sort of fundamentally changing the organization and how women are viewed, what women are actually doing, and I think there's sort of three prongs to that. One is, as was mentioned at the very beginning, the U.S. now all jobs are open to women. That actually opens up a lot of senior leadership positions that just haven't been open before, especially in the Army and Marine Corps, where the most senior leaders are always going to be ground combat. They're going to be infantry, armor, sometimes combat aviation, but because that's sort of the main effort, that's what it is. The Air Force refers to similar things as rated job track, so the fighter bomber type track. And so having the ability for women to be in those positions opens up those most senior positions for women. So that's one thing. I think I know Admiral Carol Pottinger has been on one of your webinars before, and she's I think a very important example of among the first class of women to actually be able to serve on combat ships, which allowed her to move into those command positions because of those jobs. So that's number one, that opening up these actual positions is opening things up. But the next two, I think, are ones to really dovetail from what Yael was talking about, and I'm excited to get Liv's view on this as somebody going through the system right now, because it clearly was not this way when I was even in, is both the recognition that there are structural components that are required. It's not enough just to say women are allowed in, but we have to start redefining how we conceive of childcare and caregiver leave, how we look at things like how sexual assault is prosecuted, what we consider, who can have benefits. A big part of dual military spouses issues, because like Yael, like I'm married to another veteran. The vast majority of women in the U.S. military are married, if they are married to another service member. And so just reconceptualizing what it is to have, dual military assignments that are made to make sure you're together to help actually be able to take some of that burden off and force, this isn't a choice. It's not a choice between a family life and the military as a career. And then the third is just recently, just this past year, our Department of Defense issued implementation guidance for the Women, Peace, and Security Act of 2017. And this is now DoD policy, and Defense Objective 1 that they put there, like their first line of policy, is a actual formal recognition top down from the Department of Defense that the military as an institution is better if it is a more diverse institution, and gender diversity has to be the cornerstone of that. And so we're just beginning to see, and we still have a long way to go with how our PME is done, even how our early officer and training education is done. But this mandate now to fully integrate gendered perspectives into planning processes, into recruitment and retention policies. And so that's going to start to change the character, not just of we're allowing women in, but we're actually going to be able to leverage this diversity in a really, really important way. Because otherwise you get this sort of add women and stir effect, like, okay, you can go be a fighter pilot, but we're not going to recognize that you're a woman fighter pilot. And there's no way things could be possibly different that you would need to go be a fighter pilot. Well, yeah, I mean, we're not just little men, either in what we physically need or what we emotionally are able to do. And that recognition is getting codified, and that codification is going to be essential for a meaningful breaking of the brass ceiling. And so I'll kick it to Liv, though, to talk about how she's seeing this really from her perspective as getting ready to go be one of our leaders.
I think that one of the most prominent memories I have from my time at USAFA was my freshman year. There was a squadron commander in the wing who felt that women shouldn't hold leadership positions, and it had spread like thoroughly throughout the wing, like everybody had heard about it. And this man was in charge of an entire squadron, so he had about 110 cadets beneath him. So I think that one of the big things that I really think about a lot is that, like, we need our brothers to back us up. And I think that that's like really important culturally to make sure that, like, we're still pressing against that, one of my big motivations for becoming a squadron commander was like, hey, I can do this. Like, I know I can do this. And like, I know that, like hearing that in the back of my head was like, that's just going to push me to like destroy your narrative completely. So I think that one of the biggest things is just like having our male counterparts backing us up in both like policy and like culturally. And we really can't do it without them. So I think that there's a lot of dynamic parts to it. And I think that's one of the biggest ones.
So much of what you've all said really applies to every workforce. I mean, like Yael was saying, it's not just the military, but Olivia, the importance of having men as our allies in the workplace. Kylan, what you were talking about with really needing systemic changes to create a workforce that allows women to thrive, I think are very important questions. I want to really look at, and this is something that I've heard from young women who, like Olivia, are preparing to enter the military, that they feel like because they're the first, and Olivia, I love that you're squadron leader because you're now the role model for the younger cadets, both the women and the men coming up, that women should be squadron leaders and leaders. How much pressure did you all feel when you were the first? Talia, you said you were the first. That your successes or failures were then going to be applied to all women, as if something happened, you could be used as the excuse of, well, see, this is why women shouldn't be doing it. And what was that like, feeling like you, I'm assuming, had to work, 500% harder than your male counterparts to prove women could do it?
Can I jump in on this one first, and then because I'll say this is something I was explicitly told, actually, that there's yes, we understand you met the standard, but we think you should have done a little bit higher. So there's no way at all that anyone could just justify that there might have been any preference. I'm like, well, you set a standard, and I exceeded that standard. There shouldn't be did I exceed it by as much as you wanted me to, because then why is it a standard? So that was something that was explicitly told. And so I think explicitly that, implicitly, I know we've all done it, but I think it really relates to when people ask me all the time, especially when I was serving with Dakowitz, they would ask me all the time, when will you be happy with gender integration? And my response was always, when women are allowed to fail just like men. And this was a big issue with the Marine Corps infantry school that was there, where out of the first 4 women who went through the Marine Corps infantry officer course, only 1 made it through. And they had this whole deal there, look, well, 75% of women didn't make it. We're not sure, should we reevaluate this for women? Well, that's pretty close to the attrition rate for men. And every time a man, they talked about the 3 women who didn't make it. They didn't talk about the 300 men who didn't make it through. And that those 300 men not making it through didn't say like, oh, look, men clearly shouldn't be a part of this. But those 3 women, it's like, oh, well, look, women clearly shouldn't do that. And so that really, when we start, I think we will have really integrated well, when we're able to allow women to fail and say, well, yeah, maybe that woman shouldn't have, or that person, even beyond that, that person shouldn't have. But, and I think it starts with leadership. The whole purpose of setting objective standards should be that if you meet the standard, you meet the standard. There's not gradations among men.
I love that, allowing women to fail just as men. Yeah, Yael, Orit, Talia, how about you? Does this resonate for the IDF?
I think that personally, I can just say that every time someone told me that I can't, just motivated me more. So it's in a way I should thank them, because every time someone from my childhood till now, someone that told me that I won't be able to because I'm a woman, because I'm young, because I'm I don't know, whatever. Just made me be better and made me be excellent. So once the characters that I once hid when I was younger because I thought they were too feminine or I'm too sensitive, or what I think now makes me a better commander or a better doctor. So I think we should stay women and be women in the IDF or in the U.S. Army, because that's what makes us unique, and that's why we are so good at what we do.
I'd like to follow up on that.
Yeah.
What is it specifically? And this is something that we all talked about on our pre-call that I thought was fascinating, is what is it about the way women lead that is actually possibly changing the way men lead, or even the way the military is structured? What is it that we bring to the table that, to be bold, is making the military better?
I think Liv should jump in on this one first. I'm going to out her based on a conversation we had just the other day. So I'm putting her on the spot since she's in squadron leadership position right now.
That's what happens when you're on a panel with your professor.
Yeah, right. I think that one of the things I've noticed is sometimes, and this is like just, I think, culturally accurate for society, men are more, I don't know if it's scared or less likely to use compassion in leadership. I think one of the things that I capitalize on when I lead is compassion, and that usually increases my buy-in with my people. So if I'm able to sit there and have a conversation with them and establish an interpersonal relationship through empathy, I tend to get a better result in performance and just general buy-in across the board. And I think that's something that women do very well. Kind of just like in general, if it's the way that like mentally we're built, or it's just like societally, like men are told to hide their feelings. So maybe it's less common in leadership. So I think that we certainly bring that to the table, and I think that we bring a lot to the table just in terms of being able to demonstrate our feelings through leadership. And it's not a bad thing to show your feelings as a leader. It makes you human and it humanizes you, and your people are like, hey, this is just another normal person like me. So I think that women are exceptionally good at that.
Yeah, it's almost like you're pushing against about all those stereotypes of what we're calling toxic masculinity now, which I'm sure is even heightened in a military environment, to say we don't have to lead like that. Talia, how about for you? What was your experience like at the IDF, leading as a woman? Oh, I'm so sorry. Your sound is off. Oh, it's not working. Or Orit, I'm going to turn to you while Talia is adjusting her sound.
Well, what I would say, about 20 years ago, when I was called to the flag to become the first women commissioner of prisons in Israel, it was a kind of national, or I would say a breakthrough at the national level. And I knew that if I will succeed, it's okay. But if I will not succeed, that it will be the excuse for many years to say, no, women cannot do that. That's one for the former question. And for the current one, I would say that I brought with me a kind of a different leadership style to the prison service. I shared with them more like a sharing leadership. It doesn't mean that I didn't have a responsibility for everything, of course, as the head of the organization. But I taught them to do things in a different way. You know, I have spent many times in my life sitting in a room when I was the only woman, but I was part and mainly not the higher ranking officer in the room. For the first time, I sat with my staff at the headquarters of the prison service. I was still the only woman in the room, but I was chairing it. And during the years, it has changed, because at the end, I had many other women in the room, meaning when you are there and when you have the responsibility and when you have the ability to make decisions, you make it friendlier to other talented women come through. So it means that as much as there will be women in high position, they will be opening, I hope, that's what I have done. I hope they will be opening the way for other talented women. And as much as women, there will be more women around the table, there will be diversity, and the decision will be better than it is when it is not diverse enough.
You know, I love that we say that often in JWI. It's why we mentor and lift women leaders, because when women lead, women thrive. Talia, is your sound back on? Oh, no. Oh, it was working in the pre-call. Kyle Ann, I do want to turn to you. This is the focus of your research and your specialty. Can you speak more broadly about the systemic change?
Yeah, so I think there's this way. I mean, Orit and Liv hit exactly on these characteristics, and in the chat there's been discussion on some of the research on these things too. And I think one of the big things to look at around actual change that women's leadership brings is if we think about this, and Orit talked about this a little bit at the beginning with this notion of, sort of traditional motherhood is a big part of the culture. That's not alone to Israeli Jewish culture. That is everywhere really that you have. But so women really are socialized often to think about things through different lenses, to think about others, to think about the well-being of children, to think about access to healthcare, to think about food, to think about education, even in the midst of the most horrific conflict zones that there is. And so when we think about why do we actually need this diversity in leadership, there's a robust body of scholarship on why conflicts or why wars start. And some of the biggest things as to why you actually have conflict starts is going to be social inequality, lack of access to food or water, and general corruption that exists in a government. These are things that we know also from literature. Women's participation in government, in senior leadership, directly counters. You have more women in leadership, you have less government corruption. You have more, just on a basic level, if you think about how to actually give aid, if you give money to women, they will feed their families, they will ensure kids go to school, all of this. So if we think about this from a military perspective, we want these perspectives in the planning process, because if the purpose of actually fighting a war or engaging in conflict is to prevent future conflicts from happening, I mean, that's what we always say every time we have a military intervention, like, oh, it's to prevent future conflict often. We need to stop this now so it doesn't get worse in the future. Well, why aren't we integrating those things at stage one from the planning? Why aren't we saying, okay, if we're going to go, here's the military operation we're going to take on. Let's make sure we're taking into account, what is this going to do to disrupt the social educational attainment? How is this impacting food and water supplies? What is the makeup of the new government actually going to look like? These are things that should be integrated step one. These are things that are proven that when you bring women into every part of the military planning process, and not just female bodies, but the perspective, and allow for those diversities of lived experiences to come out, you have much better outcomes at the tactical and strategic level. And my work really looked at this in regards to village stability operations in Afghanistan. And in those villages where women were, the NATO women were allowed to be women, I think Gael talked about the fear of having some of femininity out there. The places where women were allowed to be women, you saw longer lasting peace dividends because they actually meaningfully empowered the local women to take on leadership roles, rather than just, okay, we put a female body there to search women to ask for, ask if they have any intelligence or see if anybody has any bombs. Actually empowering with that cultural sensitivity, those things that transcend these geographic boundaries, religious boundaries, ethnic boundaries, around the role that womanhood really has had in society, that changing the narrative that is somehow non-congruent with military service. that's been the biggest impact that women have had. And I'll say, just because I know I've been talking for too long too, but on like the systemic change side, the Commandant of the Marine Corps just released his new suggested reading list for all officers yesterday. And I was very excited to see Brene Brown's Dare to Lead was in the leadership section of like, these are books that everyone should read before they take command. And that's in there. And I think it goes right to this, as everyone's been saying, this idea of compassion, this sense of empathy, this understanding, making these human connections with the people that you actually are leading. They're not little automatons that you are sending around. They're actual human beings who have volunteered, in our case, or have been conscripted to do something really, really hard. And as a leader, you need to have that empathy for that. So that's when we talk about real change. That was my little dance party moment last night when I was like, oh my God, we're actually about real leadership. So.
Phenomenal. I think, Talia, are you back online? Yes, okay. I want to
Yes, you hear me now? You hear me now?
Yes.
I'm in the telephone now? Yes. So maybe I return back a little bit, but I think another thing that women bring to the table as a leadership, it's, I think I noticed that the white vision, it's better, it's very dangerous to say, but I think that the white vision in women leadership is better. As sensitively okay, that's what they said before me. And I, usually they ask for my opinion for a lot of things. And the operation like Chomat Magen, the operation in a Gaza Street and the Jordan Summer area. So I think that the white vision in women, it's very helpful at the leadership table. This is what I wanted to say on top that before me said.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And I see that Sigal has listed in the chat that there's research indicating that a culture of compassion, affection, caring leads to better outcome, and that there is a current study that I believe she's leading right now with the gunnery units in the U.S. Army, and all of that is leading to greater cohesion in the units. And Steve mentioned in the chat that there is a new program that I know I've been meaning to watch. I think it's on Apple TV, Tehran, where the lead is a woman who is a Mossad agent, and he wonders if that role, that type of kind of media reflecting life, would have happened years ago to really have a kind of a military show that has a female as the lead. And I'd like to invite people now to drop some questions into the chat. We're going to be opening up the Q&A. But before then, I want to ask one more question for all of our panelists, and that is, what advice would you give to other women? And I would include non-military women about leading that you've garnered from your military experience. Would you like to begin? What advice would you give to other women?
As I said earlier, I think that the best advice I can give is first multitask, because you have to juggle everything. You have to juggle your house, your kids, your job. You have to juggle everything. Find a spouse who understands you, who understands the service, who wants your success and supports you, because you'll have to. And just be yourself. Be feminine. Be a woman, because that is what expected of you. That is why you're there, to be as you are and to inspire other people and to touch. I mean, touch not physically, mentally, to touch your people, because you probably do it better.
And I would think, especially when I remember meeting a young woman who was, I think, the highest ranking combat officer currently in the IDF when I was in Israel with AIFL. And she was talking about the weight of the responsibility to lead 18-year-olds who were in her command and how she felt. And I'm sure the men do too, but just hearing her speak as a woman of really feeling that responsibility to lead young men and women compassionately and carefully was very moving to hear.
My assistants always laugh at me, and they say that they're all kind of my kids. They say, you can't stop being a mother. You're always a mother. So just, and you do what you can.
There is that. I know. Orit, how about you? What advice would you give to other women, whether they're in the military or not, on how to lead?
I would say that first of all, dream of what you want to do. Secondly, dare to get there. And thirdly, do it. And when you are doing it, be aware of those who you are commanding or you are leading. Listen to them. There is usually very important knowledge among your subordinates or people that you are leading. Listen to them, learn from them, study things, and especially dream, dare, and do what you think you should do.
Thank you. Talia, how about you? Advice you would give to other women?
Well, yes. Well, I think that when I first become a mom, until I first become a mom, I thought that I need to look like men and to act like men for them to accept me, for them to let me do positions and active that they do, like to be in the tank, like to do some really great things that I can't talk about them. I thought that I need to look like them, to speak like them, like my voice needs to be like men. And I remember when I first became a mom, I asked myself, why? I'm a woman, I have children. I think that this is my powerful thing, that I need to react like I'm a woman. And when I felt that I really felt like I really professional, and I have a lot of things that I can do, and not to act like a man. It was really my thing that that become the opposite in my career, and from then till now, like 30 years in the army, I also said I don't need to be a man, and I don't need to do this position or this position to do some things that I want to do in the army, and that's it. That's what I act like. I act in the army.
So it almost seems like being a mom prepares you for a role in the military. So,
it's the same.
Yes.
But before I turn
very much. Yes, very much.
Before I turn to Thailand and Olivia, I want to follow up with a question we just got from
and it's been when I was 30 years old, not very young. So it's come a lot of time on it.
So Sigal added something else in the chat, which is actually a question I wanted to follow up on. And while you're all talking very openly about your ability to be authentic, be yourself, lead with compassion, she notes that there's also the reality that men, if they're angry, if they're forceful, that's still seen as a positive or as okay, and yet if women show anger or force, then they're somehow being overly emotional or angry. I think about what some of our women go through when they're running for elected office, how they have to be careful to modulate their emotions for fear of being judged and unfairly so. So what I really want to ask is, has your leadership ever been questioned by those in your direct command? Kyle-Ann, it kind of both ends, if you could answer the what advice, but also like the reality of leading like a woman.
So I think number one, for advice is to make the path smoother for those that came after you. I think there's a lot of, I know I experienced it, I would assume others did too, of like when I first got into positions, I had this whole like, it was so hard for me, like it should just be hard for everybody else too. Like that's just the way it is. It's hard, that's just how it's going to be. Well, so no, so number one, make the path easier for those that come after you because they're going to blossom and make the whole institution better. So that's one of my biggest pieces of advice is just because you had to go through something I would say unnecessarily hard, like this is a hard job and there are things that should be hard about getting to these positions just because of, the way standards are, but do what you can do to make the path easier, whether that's formal or informal mentorship. And then to dovetail on that too, and I think it adds into some of this second side of the reality is don't let men get away with things that you wouldn't let women get away with. And I think this is something that we as women leaders often hold women to higher standards just subconsciously because we're thinking like, okay, well, we need to make sure that they're kind of prepared to go into the beast. Well, and I think it goes to Liv's point too of like, we need our male allies, we need them sticking up for us. We also need to hold them accountable in the exact same way. And that also comes from this perception about, women being angry or emotional or irrational. And I think that comes from as a leader, being honest with the emotions that you are having. And in terms of like, there are times that whether it was in the Marine Corps time or even in my role now as a professor that, yeah, I've been angry at those who are under me because they have done something that has gone counter to what I have said and we have impacted the mission because of it. Like something has gone, it's not just that like, I told you to do it and you didn't do it, but like, no, there's a reason and you failed to see that. So I've been upset. And so being honest and saying, I'm upset and this is why. And then encouraging those who are under you to have the ability to display that range of emotions. Because this is something women are, and we've seen it in the US often among, I think one of the most telling things is just very recently, we've had 2 Supreme Court nominations recently. We have a woman who's right now sitting as a Supreme Court nomination, and she is very poised, very collected, very almost, demure, like not showing any range of any emotion, regardless of what is coming at her. We had a man about 2 years ago who threw a temper tantrum on the, on the stand, who literally threw a temper tantrum in response to the questions he was getting asked. And so what I think is, and that's where I say, hold men to the same standard and account that you would to a woman. Because if a woman had gotten up there and thrown a temper tantrum, everyone would have been like, well, see, look, women are unemotional. And I think that starts at, it starts at the level where Liv is leading right now among her peers and ensuring that there is accountability across the board for behavior. It goes to the level that Yael's at right now, where she's in charge of a shop, essentially, of it. We call them shops in the Marine Corps. I know that's not the official title there, but at that level, and then up to the level that Talia and then Orit went. So at every single one of these levels, as a woman, it is making it easier for others to come after you, but also not let men getting away with the things that we call out as bad behavior, because we have an opportunity to change those things.
I love that. Well, Olivia, I want to end with you. I see you nodding your head. What's your experience been, and what do you really hope to see after this year when you graduate and you begin your command?
I think so. One of the big things is leading with compassion is great. I use it constantly, but I can also be the hammer. So like, I think it's important to recognize that like I don't have to just lead with compassion the entire time. When somebody does something wrong, formal counseling, like we're sitting there together, we're going to talk about it. And I think that that's like an important aspect to leadership, especially as a woman, is you have to do both at the same time. And really capitalizing on that is important because it legitimizes you as a leader. It shows you hold people accountable, and then it shows you can also show compassion while holding your people accountable and disciplining them. So I think that'd probably be my advice. That even applies, I think, in the civilian workforce as somebody who's a boss or a CEO of a company. When people mess up, holding them accountable, it kind of goes off of Dr. Hunter's point. It doesn't matter who they are, and you just got to do it. So hopefully once I commission, the same things that I've learned here will apply, and hopefully we're in a better spot every single year. You know, we make progress every year, but it's never enough. So I think once we get to that point, which is probably going to be a while from now, then I'll finally be satisfied. But I don't think I'll stop fighting for it till we get there.
Thank you. Yeah, Yael and Talia, I'd love to give you a chance to respond on your experiences and what you're seeing in the IDF before I return to Orit to wrap us up for the day.
I feel from my experience that being a woman commanding men is something that is more natural in the IDF. I think that it was back in 1948 that in the Independence War, where men and women fought side by side in the battlefield. So when your roots fed from this ethos, it's gender equality in the IDF is something that is more, I don't know, more acceptable, more like a nature than a goal. Both of the fabulous women that served the IDF before me are very correct that, and we talked about it, about the glass ceiling, and but I think that it's something that is more natural. Everybody is like, she's a commander, he's a commander, they can be a commander. It's not something that being a woman doesn't give someone the right to tell me I'm hysterical or I don't know, emotional or a bitch, whatever. I'm the commander, and that's what I say, and that's what we do. And I can be a man and I can be a woman. It's the same. But that's my feeling, and I feel like I present the generation that.
Fabulous, Talia.
Talia is responding.
Well,
Yes.
Yes, I'm a bit older than Yael, so now it's very naturally and very acceptable. I very agree with Yael. But 20 years ago, when I always been a commander of men, I never been a commander for women. Always, maybe a few women and men, but never just on women. And I remember there is days that I need to prove that I know what I'm talking about, and I needed to say that I'm a commander. I'm your command. Now you don't need to say it. You have your everything that show it, so you don't have to say it. And I remember that I needed to do it. So that I'm your command. I say it, and you need to do it. Why? Because I know what I'm talking about. I'm the profession here. And all of that thing that you need to say, but it was a day that it's not being so acceptable to be a command on men, but now yes, it's very natural.
So I think that, like Eileen said, that you need to make your path easier for the women after you. So you kind of did it for me, Talia and Orit. And I think I just want to thank you because what I feel is very different.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We work very hard. We're welcome.
Yeah.
I love that. As we say, you lift as you rise. And I want to thank you all. This is, I feel like I personally, I could talk to you all for hours. I think this is fascinating. And I want to thank you not only for sharing your time and your wisdom today, but for your work and your service each and every day. Both of our countries are indebted to you, so I thank you. And with that, I want to turn things back over to Orit.
Thank you, Meredith. As I said at the beginning, I was looking at the issue of utilizing the best of the human resource that we have, and women here is 50% of that human resource that we have. And I said also that diversity is an advantage. And I'm looking at leadership as like, you know, we don't have small children nowadays, maybe Yael does now. And you remember playing the puzzle. The puzzle is built out of different components. Each part cannot be replaced by other one. They are all together, and leadership is the way of building up from these different components a smooth and coherent picture. This is really the ability of a leader, a woman or man, to be able to put up from these different components to a smooth one picture or one unit or one, it doesn't matter, to get your goals. I think that we have heard here about some kind of feminine qualification or characteristic. What I found out during the years that men are adapting some of the women characteristic in their leadership, which means that we are doing it the right way, and we are learning from our male colleagues, and they are learning from us as well. Thank you so much, our panelists, Dr. Kaylin Hunter, Colonel Talia Lankry, Major Dr. Yael Arbel, and the young and promising cadet, Olivia. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, the American-Israel Friendship League and the Jewish Women International for this interesting webinar, and you, our audience, for joining us. Thank you so much, and we'll hope to meet you in our next webinars of AIFL and JWI. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a nice day or evening or whatever, wherever you are. Bye-bye.